President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I enjoyed very much the remarks of the senator from Florida. He's very much concerned about this, very much plugged into the situation with what's happening in the Ukraine. And I'd just like to make a couple comments about that from a slightly different perspective. And that is that in my current position is the ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And on that, you take one part of this proposal, and that is the money that would be coming out of the military to take care of a problem that the military should not have to take care of at a time when things are really serious. Now, the IMF has all the authority it needs to meet all of Ukraine's borrowing needs. That's $35 billion with its existing commitments from the global community. The IMF does not need additional U.S. funds to help Ukraine. It does not make sense to double the size of the IMF by ratifying a 2010 agreement paying for with money that can be used for DOD to address the shortfalls, which I'm going to talk about. By the way, there is another option out there because the House has a bill. Chairman Royce of the House Foreign Affairs Committee is marking up a bill today, as we're speaking here, that I believe addresses our response to Ukraine in a more responsible way. The House bill is likely to provide $68 billion in Ukraine aid, but does not expand the IMF and removes it from the bans on the LNG. Now, this does not contain IMF reform. It does not take money from the DOD. I think that's good. And the senator from Florida commented that we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now with the Europeans afraid to come to the aid of Ukraine if it weren't for the fact that they are reliant upon Russia for their ability to produce LNG. We in this country have had a real boom in getting in the tight formations, the LNG. Right now we need to be exporting more of it to get the price up so that it can be produced for ourselves in this country. No better way than to start exporting this to countries like Ukraine. If we're doing this, and the Western European countries would not be reliant upon Russia for that ability. So I think we have an opportunity there to do something with with this bill, and hopefully we will be able to satisfy the needs of Ukraine and at the same time not provide further damage to our military. I recognize that out of the $315 billion price tag in total aid for the package, $350 million price tag, it rightly cuts $150 million from the State Department. Well, that's right, it should. That's where it should come from. But it also then takes an equal amount, $150 million away from the Department of Defense to double the size of IMF in order to give authority that isn't actually required for the IMF to adequately loan to Ukraine. The unnecessary proposed $57 million in defense rescissions to pay for this aid has already been used by the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and by the DOD, Department of Defense, to build the current defense budget. These funds have already been spent, and you can't get any more out of the military right now. If the defense is forced to pay for this aid, then the services will likely have to reduce their readiness accounts. Readiness accounts, that means lives, because we talk about risk. If you're not ready, to the degree that you're not ready, you incur more risk. Risk is translated into lives. Our national security funding can't be treated like an ATM. $157 million can be used to support critical defense readiness needs like an Army brigade combat team for 6 months, 1,000 Marine Embassy security personnel for a year and a half, about 2 months of the O&M for the second carrier air wing, almost 2 F-16 squadrons for a year. You know, what's happened to the military, if only people out there would understand, and they don't. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans and Democrats both out there not talking about this, the most serious problem that we're facing in this country. And that is what this administration, the Obama administration, has done to our military. I remember so well, 5 years ago, going down to going over to Afghanistan so I could respond to the president's budget, which was at that time going to be talking about what he was going to be doing to the military. I knew he'd begin 5 years ago to start disarming America. And what did he do? He did away with our only fifth-generation fighter, the F-22, did away with our carrier capability, the C-17, did away with our future combat system, did away with our ground-based interceptor in Poland. And now, of course, we're desperately looking for something to protect the eastern part of the United States as a result of that. That was all the first year. The first step in disarming America. Now, since that time, the president in his budget has taken out of the military some $487 billion. And if he goes through with his sequestration, it would be another $500 million. And people don't realize that where this all started. They'll say, well, wait a minute now, it's just entitlement. Yeah, entitlements is a problem because that's 60% of the total budget that goes to entitlements. But let's keep in mind, there's also discretionary spending that is non-defense discretionary spending. And we had, the first thing that was done, if you all remember, when this president took office, was to take $800 billion for a stimulus. None of that was used for the military. That was all for the stimulus. That obligated us on non-defense discretionary spending for the rest of the time at the expense of defense. And so now we're in a situation that is so serious in this country that even our military leaders have come out and made statements, and I'm going to read a couple of these. They need to be in here because people have to understand how critical this situation is in how we have disarmed this country. Secretary Hagel, just 2 weeks ago, he said, and now listen carefully to this, Madam President, American dominance on the seas, in the skies, and in space can no longer be taken for granted. Is this America? We have taken this for granted since the World War II. And all of a sudden, because of what's happened through this administration to the military in the last 5 years, we can no longer do this. General Amos said, General Amos is the head of the Marines. He agrees on the increased risk. He said, we will have fewer forces arriving less trained, arriving later in the fight. This is a formula for more American casualties. That's what we just said. The risk increases, then our very brave troops die. We had Undersecretary Frank Kendall of this administration said on the 3rd of January, quote, we're cutting our budget substantially while some of the people we worry about are going to the opposite direction. We've had 20 years since the end of the Cold War and sort of a presumption in the United States that we are technologically superior militarily. And that's not the case now. So this is what has happened. If you take the top person, the top military person, that would be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's General Dempsey. General Dempsey himself, now keep in mind, he was appointed to that position by President Obama. He said that to the Armed Services Committee, that's our committee, that we are putting our military on a path where the force is so degraded and so unready that it would be immoral to use force. This is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Immoral to use force. I mean, this is supposed to be America. We're supposed to be a superior country. And what has happened to us? Admiral Winfield, he has the second highest position. He's the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He said, quote, there could be for the first time in my career instances where we may be asked to respond to a crisis, and we have to say that we cannot. We cannot respond to a crisis. This is something that unfortunately not very many people are aware of in terms of what we're doing. So yes, we want to do what we can for Ukraine, and we believe that the State Department certainly has an obligation, but the other half of the amount, the $157 million, cannot come from the military because we are so unready today. So I think that when we are considering this, we have to consider that we have a real serious problem with our military that unfortunately people are not aware of, and a lot of politicians don't talk about it because they're uncomfortable talking about it. I want to